funding source. Interest would be accruing at 180 days following the date upon notice of any insufficiency. So if for some reason the Board of Public Works did not grant reimbursement, it would still be a loan that the county would be repaid back at 1%. So as I mentioned, it's the Board of Public Works, Maryland Board of Public Works, which is the ultimate agency that decides the reimbursement of those funds, although up to this point, we believe we've submitted all the intended documentation for that to happen, but it will take probably 40 days or so before we find an answer back. And so more or less, we're seeking to move forward with the intent that those reimbursements would be received at a later time. So, Mayor, would you like to provide an update on where the town is since we've last met?
Yep, the town currently has all the documentation that we need to go to settlement. There was an issue with the title, which has been corrected, and the town attorney has approved the corrections to that. And we're hoping, with your blessing, that we can go to settlement on the 3rd to acquire the property and then give those people that are tenants proper notice and give them 9 months to 12 months to be able to move. With the help of the town and other agencies, we're going to reach out to as many people as we can to help those people to be able to move.
Paul, just a quick question. Did you make, I guess you have a plan to clean the property off, because you know there's going to be a lot of mobiles left, I'm sure.
Yep, we have plans. We have talked to a demolition contractor and have an estimate on each one of the mobile homes that would be left. I think right now there's probably 4 or 5 that are abandoned. So we're gonna work on that ourselves to try and move those out. We're going to take care of the mowing of the property and get it cleaned up, because right now it's pretty in a state of disrepair that we need to make it look nice.
Did you say like condemned band? Did you say band, 4 or 5 band?
Abandoned.
Abandoned. Oh, okay.
Abandoned trailers.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Abandoned. Yes, sir.
Paul, thank you for, because I know your commission and your council members, they've mentioned that to me as a county commissioner almost many times as we come out for our evening meetings. So I think, the plan that you all are putting in place are really going to be a nice opportunity to draw more people to your community, and it's just going to, it needs cleaned up.
Yeah, it does, and I believe it'll also present a lot of recreational activities for people there in the town, and also for people in the county.
Well, I can see it now. Big trout fishing.
Oh, it'll be great.
For kids.
Yeah, the kayaking's big stuff. And,
Also, you'd mentioned a settlement date. I missed it.
June the 3rd. Yep.
And then the only other thing that I had, I know you'd mentioned a 1% interest. I know that's good interest. If it ever gets to that and we can help with that, I think I'd be okay with that also.
Great. Thank you, Terry. Appreciate it.
very good. Commissioner, any other questions? Entertain a motion to approve the execution of the forward funding.
Motion to approve execution of foreign funding.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a first and second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
5-0.
Thank you all very much.
Congratulations. Good luck.
Okay, thank you.
10:30, we're a little early. Is Julie Rom and Mark Bradshaw outside?
That is a good idea, what Andrew just did.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you did? Oh, there's a note there. I gave you way too much credit. Daggone it.
During this brief time, Kirk, do we have any updates on Fort Ritchie and settlement for that?
Currently, we're waiting for the appeal period to expire. Can't go to settlement until the appeal period expires.
And that's 30 days?
30 days from the court's decision, yes.
Thank you.
We will need to, because the extension expires before the end of the appeal period, we will have to ask for another extension of the contract to get beyond the appeal period portion.
Do we know when that appeal period ends?
15th. It's approximately the middle of the month.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bradshaw, is Julie Rom expected to attend? Okay. Well, you're welcome to begin and introduce yourself in the matter, sir.
My name's Mark Bradshaw, Deputy Director for Environmental Management. I'm here today. Back in January, I came before you. I brought the matter before the board for consideration for a proposed subdivision of the BJ's Brew House and the former Sears parcel at the Valley Mall. The proposed subdivision would involve sewer flow from the subdividing parcel through the mall's private sewer system before entering the county sewer line, which would contradict the county's policy. The board reached a unanimous consensus to allow an exception from the county policy regarding sewer service, provided that the new maintenance agreement was created, relieving the county from all maintenance and of the shared private line, and that a contribution of the maintenance agreement be entered between future owners of the parcel jointly served by the shared private line. The owner has prepared and submitted the agreement of maintenance to the county for review. The county attorney's office has reviewed the agreement and has recommended its approval, provided it is recorded in the land records upon execution. So we're here today to request a motion from the board to proceed with executing the agreement of maintenance as prepared by the owner of the Valley Mall for the shared sewer line access.
Commissioners, questions, comments?
Make a motion to approve the execution for the agreement of maintenance.
Motions are second.
I'll second.
I have a first and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. 5-0. Thank you very much. Well, we're a little ahead of schedule. Commissioners, if I could beg your indulgence, we're scheduled for 10:35. I'd like to wait to 10:35 so people wanting to view this online would have the opportunity at 10:35. Terry, would you be okay with a short break so we can keep on schedule with the 10:35 water and sewer?
Yeah, I think that's more than fair considering if people wanted to watch it.
Is that okay, Commissioners? We'll take a brief break. Thank you.
We better stop them from bringing them in.
We'll stop. We'll be back about 10:30.
About 15 minutes, Tom.
right, welcome back, everyone. On our 10:35 agenda, the topic is approval of water and sewer rates fiscal year 2021. Staff, would you introduce yourself in the matter?
I'm Jeremy Mose, Director, Division of Environmental Management.
And Sarah Greaves, Chief Financial Officer.
On May 12th, a public hearing was held to permit the public to testify concerning the proposed modification of water and sewer rates. The public comment period was held open for 7 days following the hearing and closed on May 19th. Water and sewer revenue requirements show that an increase in water and sewer revenue is necessary to facilitate the Department of Water Quality's long-range financial plans. The presented rate schedule for fiscal year 2021 is based on this requirement. Using an average of 12,000 gallons per quarter, each 3.5% rate increase would cost the user approximately $6 more per quarter. Based on rate model projections, rates must increase in order to get back to self-supported status. Currently, expenditures exceed revenues by $130,000 in the water fund and by $1.4 million in the sewer fund. The Water Quality Fund has made some structural changes to help save money, and we have paid off the 96A bonds, which have contributed immensely to the effort in reducing our expenditures. However, we still have a serious shortfall that needs addressed. Additionally, I would like to comment on what the department is doing to help make the fund self-sustaining. We are making improvements that are saving on operational costs. These improvements include reduced equipment and chemical usage by closely monitoring the start and stop times of plant components. The improvement to plant operations helped us reduce the electric and chemical bills substantially. We are also realizing a savings by ordering operating supplies in bulk, and we are closely monitoring every purchase. The Department of Water Quality will continue to look for ways to improve our operational efficiency, and we will continue to do our part to make the Water Quality Fund self-sustaining. Sarah?
Thank you, Jeremy. Incremental increases over a period of time has been the existing plan in place to work towards a self-supported status for these funds. So we must continue that effort as we look towards meeting our long-range plans. I urge the commissioners today to consider that the water and sewer funds are enterprise funds, and in that, the cost of the system should rightfully be paid by the users, not the responsibility of other taxpayers. Please do not shift the cost from the 13,000 users to 67,000 taxpayers. As a necessary cost of doing business, we have had to make our own difficult decisions here at the county. If we fail to increase for fiscal year 21, the period in which the fund will be self-supported will be extended from year fiscal 2023 with an anticipated loan amount of $1.2 million to 2024 with a projected loan amount of $2 million. The repayment of the loan will continue to affect rates, so you can see it continues to extend the rate increases further into the future. This will also impact the way our county is viewed from the rating agencies. Please seriously consider the decision today and the impact on our county as a whole. As an aside, any loan will impact our current cash reserves. And with that, I would ask you to adopt the proposed water and sewer rate schedule, or certainly respond to any questions that you may have.
I have a couple. So what you're proposing to make this work is, so the average water sewer is $6 a quarter.
The average user is 12,000 gallons, yes.
And I asked last week if there's a way we could miss it this year and pick it up at the, just prolong it a year, and your answer was, if we borrow from the general fund, right? That's the only way.
That's correct.
Which, I won't do that because then you're making well and septic pay, is that correct or not?
Yes, that's correct.
And that's, how many of those, the 30-some thousand?
Jeremy, do you have those figures?
Of well and
I can tell you that, I mean, we have, 60,000 households and 12 to 13,000 users on the water and sewer system.
Well, I think there's in the 30s, 35, 38, 40 or whatever.
Well, if we would take a loan from the general fund or borrow money from the
Well,
general fund.
I can't do that because I know what it costs for well and septic. You know, just everybody's got bad
Well, then
water
have
right
all-
away.
all
It's
the taxpayers.
$900 just for UV light.
Yeah, then you'd have taxpayers paying for water
Right.
and sewer that don't receive a water and sewer service.
Exactly.
But you're correct, well and septic, they pay for their
Septic could be
maintenance.
30,000 for repairs or replacement, or
It could be.
35. So I need another way. Is there another way that we didn't have to raise?
There's not another way that I would recommend.
So
I would recommend the rate increases that are proposed.
But, and a loan?
If you do not increase rates and you choose to loan from the general fund, there are implications to doing that. And one of those is then the rates will continue to increase because they'll have to pay back that loan. And if that loan amount is more than it would have originally been because we failed to increase rates for fiscal year 21, that will have an impact again to the ratepayers. So it will still impact them. Just at a later date. It also is viewed negatively from the rating agencies and their evaluation of our county because then they will view the sewer fund as not self-supported and they'll include the debt burden in our debt calculation. And that could have an impact on our county as well.
How long do we, every year we tell, I know it's been years, how many years do we tell the water sewer accounts that they're going to have a raise? How many years is that going?
I'm not sure. I know that generally we do suggest an increase in water and sewer rates, but again, like I said before, that was the plan from the start. Based on the plan that was set before the commissioners years and years ago, it was an option, either raise rates 15-20% right now and then have even smaller increases later, or raise it smaller incrementally and draw down fund balance. That's what we chose to do to make it more cost-effective for our citizens.
One more question, I'll let Jeremy, is there, do you foresee anything, because you're the director of easing this in the next 4 years, do you see anything you do with the county?
Well, we'd have to continue doing our part. Our job is to provide clean, safe drinking water to the citizens of Washington County and provide a sewer service within federal regulations. One of the problems is that every year the operational costs continue to increase. Also, with the new regulations, and more oversight from the state, from the federal government.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, state dictates a lot of this to us, which increases our costs.
A lot of these, and, like the Smithsburg wastewater treatment plant upgrade we have going on right now, that's part capacity and part regulations to meet ENR standards through the state. So a lot of the increases actually come from state mandates, federal mandates, and we can continue to do our part by operating the plants as most efficiently as we can.
So there's nothing to say to state delegate, that's mostly Democratic, obviously, they won't come down and hand us more mandates next year. There's no guarantee of that.
Oh no, you can almost guarantee there'll be.
Guarantee they will.
You can almost guarantee there'll be more mandates next year. Yeah, it keeps getting stricter and stricter every year.
That's all I got.
Sarah, how much is in the fund balance for the water and sewer currently?
The fund balance or the cash reserve amount?
The cash reserve.
Cash reserves in the sewer fund, I believe, I don't have the number in front of me, but if my memory serves me right, approximately 800,000. I think we're going to pick up a few hundred thousand for the current fiscal year, and so that's where we've come to the conclusion that for fiscal year 21, with the rate increase, we wouldn't have to borrow from the general fund.
Okay. And then the water?
The water fund, maybe 200,000. And we expect that to be completely depleted for the fiscal year 21 budget.
We're also realizing a savings right now because last year Sarah and Dan presented a reorganization with retirements and not filling positions through attrition, and we're realizing those savings right now with retirements, and we're still actively doing that through attrition. We're going to look at every position. Is this something we need? Through attrition only.
And that's part of the department's level of management and how we're trying to get ahead of this as best we can.
Yes, my concern with the water, and from talking to people, is we're 3.5% raises about $20,000, and we're seeing expenditure exceed revenue by 130, and it doesn't look like in the foreseeable future, and I'll say 10 years, that we're going to be able to make these numbers match. So that we're not raising rates, and that kind of scares me.
For clarification, Commissioner, just for the water fund
Just
only,
the water
correct?
fund, yeah, just the water fund. I'm not talking sewer, just the water fund. And we have to start looking at a different way than what we're currently doing and the path that we're doing for the water fund. I know we've talked about Sharpsburg and taking surface water versus groundwater, and that's the most expensive way of doing it. But we have to start looking at other ways because I can't remember the number, I think you said it was 117 or 170 additional accounts to be able to make the water fund
Self-sustaining,
self-sustaining, and, well, good luck.
Well, it's the customer density in the water fund that, the miles of pipes we have versus how many customers.
Exactly, and that's the big thing I think the state doesn't realize that we have here. We're not Montgomery County where you can pile people on top of people and they're
Well,
right next to each other.
The more customers you have, the lower we can keep the rates. The water fund is suffering in that aspect just because lack
All
of,
I've ever heard, the more users, the lower the rates, we have more users than ever.
The users of the water system have not increased substantially over the years. That's part of the problem. I think there was hopes that Fort
Maybe I
Ritchie,
don't understand what a user or a customer is.
we only have about 1,000 water customers
a little over.
out of our
We call it, we'll call that a little over 1,000 accounts that get billed
yeah.
for the
It's
water.
very low number of people.
And that's what I'm talking about. That's my fear is with the water fund is, we've got to find a way to get self-sustaining, and it's not going to be raising rates because that's just not going to happen over 10 years at
We can see that,
3.5%.
right.
So
And
the sewer funds is definitely different. So
and we'll continue doing our part, like we talked about, thinking outside the box and try to think of other solutions to save money on the water fund and doing things more efficiently. And if it's looking at different treatment processes, we're certainly going to look at all those options.
thank you.
The reason you're suggesting a rate increase, and we have that rate increase suggested every year, is for our required reserves, right?
No, the rate increase will be used to pay for the current expenditures. There are no, we do not meet our current reserve requirement right now.
So we don't meet the current reserve requirement. That's part of the concern though, right?
That
Is
is-
that reserve requirement, is that calculated by the state of Maryland? That's calculated through our model, right? Is that model imposed on us by the state of Maryland?
The reserve requirement is an internal policy of 25% of operation and maintenance cost. The reserve requirement for sewer is 2.8 million.
But we're currently spending more than we're taking in, so it's more than just a reserve requirement. We're actually negative.
We are.
Okay.
The reserve requirement is part of the problem, right? I mean, that's part of your concern.
The
Or are we
reserve-
not concerned at all about we're not meeting our reserve requirement?
I will be concerned more about the reserve requirement once we get to a self-supported status. Right now, we are in a position where we'll be able to use the cash reserves that we have to help balance fiscal year 21's budget. At that point, we'll need a loan, and then we'll be able to at some point build up that reserve, but we'll have to build up that reserve and pay back a loan once the fund is self-supported.
And the only reason
Two
why
questions,
we
yes
have
or
any-
no, if I can. Required reserve, we're not meeting that now, right?
Correct.
Okay. Then the next question, that is our calculation internally.
Correct.
Not a state calculation.
Correct.
So what would it take to look at that reserve, that calculation? I know we have a policy. Can that policy be looked at and tweaked in some way? Is 25% the right number? What do other counties do? What do other jurisdictions do? And it seems like that's a concern I have. It sounds like a concern Commissioner Monschmidt also has, that maybe we're never going to be that. 10 years down the road, we're still not going to meet that reserve. I wonder, what can we do if that policy is at our discretion? To what degree do we have, how much leverage do we have in changing that?
It is up to the county commissioners. However, we should have a reserve. 25% is not too much. And even if we reduce the reserve requirement, we're not meeting it today anyway,
The reserve account is used for what purpose?
in case of emergencies,
Like
like COVID-19 or, there's a lot of reasons. There's
major
maybe
water line break?
If you have,
something could
if
happen.
you have, like a major water line break, in Sharpsburg, or something happens to the intake where it pumps the water in, we may have to call in tanker trucks to haul water to.
Right, so we want to have a reserve. We would recommend keeping it. There's a plan in place. What the policy says is that if you don't meet your reserve, you need to put a plan in place so that you can build it back up. And so that's what we're trying to do with the water sewer rate models that we have, the projections that we have, and why we're here presenting the rate increase today.
No, and the only reason we have any reserve currently in the sewer fund is because we gave $3 million last year.
That's correct.
Otherwise, we'd be
Negative.
negative.
Correct. Yes. Came from the general fund,
Yeah,
sir.
last year we gave $3 million from the general fund to the sewer fund. And so, that's the only reason we have.
As a one-time.
It's a
It
one-time.
was supposed to be a one-time appropriation, something that we don't want to repeat.
And if we didn't have that, we'd be negative, and we're currently spending more than we're taking in.
Yes, by about $1.5 million.
Sarah, I had this conversation with you last week after our meeting had ended. It had to do with, we had discussed with our budget being lean, that maybe we could do a mid-year review of some things, funding to outside agencies, increase county spending, whatever. Could you talk a little bit about, share a little bit about that with us?
Sure.
To what extent can this decision be delayed? And look to see, and I'm thinking about the impact of our citizens that are impacted by COVID. They're personally, and I know 3% is a small amount, but you know, we say every time there's an increase in burden on our taxpayers or our rate users, it's just this amount. Well, now that, you know, it's just this amount and it's compounded by other effects happening in their lives, and could we be up to a 20% unemployment rate right now? I mean, this impacts a lot of people. Do we have the time to delay this decision to see how the lives of our citizens might be positively or impacted a little less in the near future? 6 months down the road, maybe 3 months down the road?
I mean, that is at the commissioner's discretion. I would say from a financial perspective, I would not recommend delaying the decision because any delay pushes costs to the general fund in some capacity or another, whether an appropriation or a loan. And that's what I'm here to say. I would rather not, but that definitely was one of your questions. And I think I said last week too, it wouldn't be my recommendation to do that because also then you have the compounded impact of any other rate increases that may occur, you know, next year. So let's say you do delay it until January and then in July you have another. So the effect and the impact on our citizens, you know, the 6-month time frame to get used to an increased cost versus a year would be something to consider.
Would it be safe to say a loan or delay could have us come back with a 5% increase higher than the current 3?
Well, I think what you would see if you look at the rate model, sir, is that it does call for a higher increase than 3.5%. And so, you know, that's why we are here today to say our goal is to have a lower rate increase than may be necessary over a number of years rather than a higher increase all at once. But yes, the rate model calls for could call for a 5% increase today. We're not proposing that.
I know a couple weeks ago you even mentioned about having a different rate model or using an updated one. Mm-hmm. Is that still something you think?
It is something that I think should be explored. The value in that would be to review the cost of service model, which would be valuable to just make sure that the rates are where they should be, but it doesn't change the fact that we don't have enough money to pay for our expenditures today.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, we have to be able to pay for what we have, but I'm looking, you know,
down the line.
road.
I do think it's a worthwhile investment and something that we should consider. Unfortunately, we don't have it in the budget, so it would be a further conversation.
About how much does something like that cost?
The last one, I believe, was around $50,000. That was done back in like 2000, early 2000. So probably 100,000, maybe, is a rough ballpark. I don't know, but
That's something in the months to come too. We'll work together with Budget and Finance to see what options are available for rate studies and rate models.
yeah.
Well, I've been here many years, as many of you know, and every year we sit here and we talk about this model, and we talk about how we're going to get rate increases, much less, and we still have never put together a team for me to be able to support any increase. As of now, I'm a no vote on increasing the water sewer rates. For me, I would like to delay for 6 months, put together our team to try to come up and study them, you know, put together a model. And I don't know if each commissioner would would entertain the thought or not, I'd want my own personal person at the table to look at models and different models and so forth to see if we can come up with something that's not going to continue to cause increases in the water sewer rates. When this all began 17, 20 years ago and they had to come up with a model, they came up with a model then. Why can't we come up with a model now? And you have many of the users are seniors. They're on fixed incomes. This COVID has just been a really hardship on them. Taxes were increased last year. People are paying more taxes now than ever. Government's continuing to ask for more and more all the time, and I understand this is a fee and so forth, but it's going to be really hard for me to support an increase today. I would personally like to delay it for at least 6 months, put together a team. I would like to have my own personal representative there representing one of the representatives of the committee to come up with try to come up with a new model. And if they would come back and say this is what it has to be, I would be great with that. But for me now, every year I ask about putting together a group to study the model, and once we vote on the budget, it's not going to happen. And then next year we're going to be right back in the same boat. And I don't think we can continue at the rate that we're continuing. The people are crying for help. They're crying for relief. They're asking us not to increase their fees. So I'm going to represent and stand for the people. You know, I personally have always stood for less government, less taxes, and fees, and I'm going to hopefully stay the course on that. So that's what I would like to do, is just delay for 6 months, put together a team to see if we can actually come up with something. Okay. Also, the $3 million that we used to shore up the water sewer with the general fund, is that in the form of a loan?
No, sir. That was an appropriation from the general fund. The
Okay.
sewer fund won't have to pay it back.
And you said if we have to go into the general fund now, it would be a loan.
We would recommend a loan,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So, anyhow, they're my views. Thank you.
Okay.
My question would be, what expertise is needed to be on a committee, or we'd be better hiring a firm
Yes.
that has the financial and auditing, because you're asking a lot from a citizen. And I'm not disagreeing that we need help.
Let's do both.
But if to pull an average citizen, I don't know what
To-
expertise they would have that
Right.
we would need a firm.
To develop the current model that we have, we did contract with a company where this was their expertise. And so I would suggest that we would have to do something similar. The model is, it's a budget tool. And so what I can say about it is that, you put the information in that you have and what you project. As far as your revenue increase, how many more accounts you think are going to come online, what your wages and benefits are expected to do over a 10-year period, what debt service you have coming in, which comes from estimates of the capital plan, the current debt service that we have and future debt service that we have. So what I can say about it, even though it's 20 years old, it's a good budgetary tool. It shows you where you are today and where you expect to be in the future. Even if the model changes, it's not going to change those key assumptions. And so I just think that that's something important to consider. What it may change is the base rate this and the volume rate that. That may change. But either way, it's going to require an increase in cost from our users because we know that we don't have sufficient revenues. So whether the cost is in the base or the volume, it's still going to increase rates. And overall, it does a good job projecting revenues and expenditures as long as you're putting in realistic information.
Commissioner Baker, are you looking at more for a committee to look at the model and what the projections are? Are you looking at more for a committee that's going to look at what the operations are in the water and sewer and trying to find ways to cut costs?
Could it be both?
Well, that's what I'm asking. Because the model, and that's what I was finding, for there's a way to purchase a model, and I 100% believe we need to be looking at different ways to do this, because the path especially with the water, the path that we're on right now, we're not going to be self-sustaining.
I have an idea, if I can share, that kind of encompasses, maybe a mix. Okay.
But that would come from the commissioners. We all would have input, and we would.
Well, that's what I'm asking, and I could support having a committee looking helping Jeremy. Yeah, I'll bring it up again. I said last year we need to be looking at ESCOs. I think it's a good way, and that could be one option. Looking at one, and there's a lot of different options that are out there. And I know Jeremy's doing a lot of research trying to work on this. But that being said, on the sewer fund, I don't think we are. We're at a spot now in the sewer fund that we need to raise revenue. We're losing $1.4 million a year in that fund, and that's just expenses versus revenue. So, but I 100% agree we need to look at different options.
So maybe my compromise could be, what if we were to increase the rates as presented today, delay the receipt of the additional over and above what users are paying now, so that could be collected in 1 quarter or in 2 quarters down the road. In the interim, we form a group to do both what Commissioner Meinersman has suggested, look at the operations in general, what Commissioner Baker had suggested, look at the rate. I have confidence, this is not everyone's area of expertise, water and sewer. It's certainly not my area of expertise. But I think we have some competent citizens that could help look at this with a fresh perspective. Have them report back to us in a quarter, and whatever timeline that we decide. I think we need an end date, so we do know we get a response. But we could approve the rate, but just delay the collection of that money. And hopefully in that interim, situations with the coronavirus may change. Our citizens may be in an improved financial position, but delay that
delay of collection will be hitting people with a lot of money at one time. It would be better to continue the collection rate normally if we wait.
Yeah, that was a clarifying question I had. When you say delay the receipt, do you mean delay the increase, or do you mean request double in quarters 3 and 4?
So it would be the 3.5% increase that you're suggesting. It's already been said it's not that much money. So obviously 2 quarters of that money isn't still not that much money according to that philosophy. I disagree with it, but we would collect it they're billed quarterly. Mm-hmm. We would collect 2 quarters of that 3.5% increase in the second quarter that we would have collected.
So the first 2 quarters, they would not be charged the increase.
Right.
So with that, if that was the way the commissioners would choose to go today, there would still need to be a loan, and there would still, or an appropriation, because it would have to make up the differential of that revenue loss.
I'm not objecting, just asking questions. If we delay collection of that money, aren't we hitting them with a big bill in the 3rd quarter?
Only if it was going to compound. So let's say it was 3.5% for the 1st and 2nd quarters, but instead of doing that, we're going to charge them 7% in quarters 3 and 4. That would create that situation, sir. I think what Commissioner Kiefer is suggesting is to increase past the increase, but not implement it until
we
January
could do it
1.
either way.
So as an example in real numbers, it increases by $6 quarter 1, $6 quarter 2. Instead, quarter 3, it's increased by $18, and then quarter 4, it's increased by $6. Is that what you're?
That could be one approach, whatever might be agreeable.
That's what I was wanting to clarify what you were saying.
That could be one approach, or just it would delay the increase.
Or you're just saying delay it so that we would prove it, but it's not effective until January 1st.
Sure.
Okay.
How is that going to fix our loan? You say you don't want us to loan money. How's that going to? We have to still loan money on that?
The only way we would not have to loan money on that could potentially be if we doubled up the cost in quarters 3 and 4.
And in the meantime, what would happen if the committee would come back and they could present a different way as to how we could increase rates, or how we could, they may come up with a plan and an opportunity for us to decide and agree with them that we may not even have to raise their rates. And I'm just a wishful thinker, I know.
Yes, sir. I don't see a path forward that looks like that. And in my opinion, too, I mean, if we double up the rates in January and March for those quarters, what about in July? Is there another rate increase?
What if you collected, do the opposite of what Commissioner Kiefer just said, collect the money in the first couple quarters at 3.5%, and if we find we don't, it's a different story in the 3rd and 4th quarter.
Commissioners can always come back and make a modification, I suppose, to reduce it.
Instead of, so we don't have to borrow it right away, collect the money the first 2 quarters, and if we don't have to the third and fourth, or something changes, we can modify, correct?
You can, here's my concern, is that we are $1.5 million apart in our revenues and expenditures for the sewer fund. That is not, there's not gonna be a miracle cure for that. It is gonna be in the form of a rate increase. Whether you have someone look at the model, the numbers don't lie. And we have cut costs that were fixed. We've not hired positions that we felt like we could delay. We have taken other measures, as Director Mose has stated. It's not a matter of, do you think that we'll be in a better position once there's a review? No. The answer is no. We're in $1.5 million apart. So we need rate increases. There's no way around it. And we expect, even with these rate increases, that we're going to need a loan of $1.2 million in fiscal year '22. So
I don't know, I guess, me, where I'm at is implement what you're suggesting and then do what the under commissioner is suggesting.
Well, don't we
review.
already have an advisory committee assembled for water and sewer? So
Yeah,
why
have
wouldn't
a-
we,
we have
why
an
wouldn't we use
environmental-
that group of citizens?
Yes, sir.
Instead of appointing people? Wouldn't that be, it's already established?
Yes, sir. We have an environmental advisory committee.
Okay, there you go, that's already done.
I'm fine with a 3.5% increase as, for sewer fund as of now, but I agree with Commissioner Baker and if Commissioner Klein, if we need to set a specific agenda for that advisory committee saying, look, we want this and we want this at this date. If we want to make sure that our own personal people are on there, I'm fine with that, but any help that we can get, we need on the sewer fund. So, yeah, I'm fine with the 3.5% now. I don't think delaying it 6 months is gonna help us. And
But I'm hearing all the commissioners think we need a review, and there's where that advisory committee could come in to be an independent citizens panel that we've trusted enough to nominate to be on there to set that review.
And we can make
If
that
we-
the number one priority of the
If we use
advisory.
any delay and use a loan, our rates could come back and be 5% to pay back the loan. So do we want that risk?
right.
So I'm in agreement with everybody. I'm going to suggest that we go forward with the increases, but we use our advisory council that's already formed to begin a study and see how we can begin to lower these rates and better review that model. So that's just my thoughts.
How do I get a list of the advisory committee?
I can send that over to you, sir.
Krista can send it to you right now.
If a commissioner wants a personal
Yeah.
representative
Environmental.
to join the advisory
Yes.
committee,
And those meetings are open to the public, so any citizens can sit in that
Yes.
meeting.
They're open to the
correct?
public too.
if a commissioner would want an individual that's not on the advisory committee to sit along with that group, I would want support for that.
if we need to.
Then we'll take, how many's already on that committee? 6, 7, then we
Yeah,
move the committee to 12? And
Yeah.
we agreed on
We
all
need to
those. I'm
adjust
not
the-
disagreeing with, but we've already
Yeah, if
agreed.
we need to adjust the bylaws for
Yeah,
that
we just
committee,
have to
I'm
adjust the
That would be a
bylaws. That's
bylaw issue then too, probably, yeah.
I think we just change the bylaws to accommodate everybody's wishes.
So if it's all right, I'm sorry.
Okay, it'll,
And did I mention what would the timeline look like? I know you'd have to talk to the committee and everything, but
I would say,
mean, would you-
I'd
would
give
you-
them 3 months.
3 months?
3 months report back, make it a priority.
Many of our committees, I don't know the bylaws for this committee offhand, but many of our committees allow for ad hoc committees or subcommittee groups, and they don't necessarily have to be an official appointed member, so that might be a way we can incorporate both Commissioner Klein's
Very good
suggestion,
idea.
we have the committee official, and then Commissioner Baker's suggestion that each commissioner appoint a member. I would be in support of that.
I would support a committee like that to help out.
If we could have on next week's agenda, have the bylaws on, so if we need to change them or adjust them or do anything, we can get that done next week. Is that fair?
Environmental Management Committee can do subcommittees.
Outstanding.
Okay.
So if it's all right, I'd like to make a motion on this, but I do want to do this separate. But I'd like to make the motion to increase the sewer fund by 3.5%, with the stipulation that we will have the Environmental Service Committee report back to us in 3 months.
And that commissioners will appoint a member for the
That-
subcommittee,
Subcommittee.
Yep.
if that's part of it.
Commissioners can appoint to members.
Can
of
we
the
have so we can be expeditious as possible, can we have our name submitted by next week? If we
sub-
would-
that.
I'm with me.
Okay. With that, I would second.
Court, are you doing water and sewer at the same time?
I'm just doing sewer at this point.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
With that, I would second.
First and second, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Water.
The water fund, I'm sorry, I know we need to increase the rates. I know it's negative. We're exceeding spenders by $130,000. The 3.5% is that it only increases us by $20,000 a year. If we raise it 3.5% for 10 years, we're not going to get there. We've got to find a different way of the water. I'm not comfortable at this point raising the water at 3.5%. So we've got to find a different way.
That's something we could explore in the advisory committee as well.
Thank you, Court, you're making it easy for me. Thank you.
Right, I need direction on the water rates.
Commissioners, as this is being discussed, can consideration also be given to what source would provide for the $20,000 that the 3.5% provides for in the fund, because something will have to replace that, whether it be general fund dollars or a loan.
Do we have any money left in, and I'll bring it up, in that, whatever's called the Commissioner's Contingency Fund?
Well, this would be for next year, so for fiscal year 21, the 20,000. Yeah. I mean, so you're
But
saying
the Commissioner's Contingency Fund still is general fund dollars from all the taxpayers, so you're still not getting around putting the cost on everybody.
It is, but also more my concern, rather than that, would be the fact that we would be trying to use this year's savings to buffer next year's budget, which at the end of the day, we don't really know what our surplus or our deficit would be. Yeah. So I don't think that would be a viable option. What I can say is we already have $110,000 general fund appropriation going to water. We see that, you know, it's not going to be self-supported. I've stated it before here in public session that, you know, it is going to need a general fund appropriation. If you don't increase the rates, the appropriation will be more. If you do increase rates, the appropriation will be less.
Sarah, I'm really impressed and thankful that the first draft of our budget you presented to us and the budget we're going to vote today has been, because of necessities of COVID and income revenue projections being declined, $17 million difference. Phenomenal. Can we not find $20,000?
No, we don't have that in the general fund reserve.
No, in the operations for the water and or sewer department.
So $20,000, there's two options if it's going to come from the general fund. One, the commissioners could increase the income tax revenue that is estimated by $20,000. It has been reduced because of our concern related to COVID-19. The other option would be to try to find that $20,000 from other departments. So it would impact.
Yeah. I wouldn't be interested at all in trying to fudge the numbers of projected revenue. If you projected a certain amount, I don't want to increase revenue projections just to make a budget balance, because that's not a good thing.
That is
but
definitely.
I'm looking at the water and sewer department within its own operations, because it is its own enterprise fund. Can we find $20,000 of savings within that department? Not other departments, but within that department.
Well, it'd just be in the water department.
Just for clarification, I would never suggest changing a projected revenue number to get where we need to be. The only reason that was a comment was because we have reduced that so much as for our budget to protect us against the impact of COVID-19, because we don't really know what that is. So just for clarification. And from my review of the budget, I don't see where we can find $20,000, but potentially Director Mose may be better suited to answer that question.
Before Director Mose, I want to say something. If it's any way we do anything at 20 that affects the well users, I'm not real happy with that. They got enough expense having a well. Second, we're 52 people short. There's not a 20,000 savings with an employee somewhere that we're short?
So there has, number one, been an effort to not hire, and that has been included in the budget numbers that have been presented. So we can't use those savings for the $20,000. Will there be turnover in the fund? during the year that we don't have budgeted, yes, there will be. Is it gonna equal 20,000? I'm not sure.
What we did, there's, I believe, 3 open positions we had. We put them on hold until December just to help with a leaner budget for the COVID-19 crisis. So we will realize the savings for holding those positions for 6 months.
That have not already been included in the budget.
And that wasn't included in our reorganizational plan.
Okay.
What was that
That's addition-
savings amount, do you know?
Half a year of 3 positions. What positions were they? Utility workers?
Around grade 9s and grade 10s. So half a year's salary and benefits for about 3 positions.
Yeah, so there will be 20,000. If we
If you're
wanna write
willing to
down.
hold those off for 6
7 months, yeah.
Is that something that you can maintain your service and quality of life and morale?
We probably could, but it's, the 6-month thing was to give us time to see if we really needed those or not. And we can also use it here during the COVID crisis to help with a leaner budget.
You weren't gonna hire them anyway for 6 months.
Well, we were gonna hire them, before the COVID-19 crisis started, then to
Gotcha.
help with a leaner budget.
Would you foreseen hiring them in the next 3 to 6 months anyway?
Not necessarily, depends on when we talk about morale and employee concerns,
Yeah, but if you
are
have
they-
3 and one of them would cover 20,000, right? For
Oh, yeah,
6 months.
Would
absolutely.
overtime be generated
Revenues continue to drop. We
by
have
not having those 3 and negate any gain?
Great question.
There certainly would be some overtime generated for not having those 3, and that would certainly have to go into factor.
Well, Jeremy, why don't you do us a big favor and try to find an additional $19,000?
I can, sir. I will.
And then everybody, and I understand morale and all of that there, but if our revenues continue to plummet, we're gonna be making,
Yes, sir, I'm
more
gonna do
cuts
every-
anyhow.
I'm gonna do everything I can to
Thank you.
get this back to self-supporting.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we're, as a county, taking a beating and everybody else is wanting a bunch of money.
Yeah,
I don't like that either. I mean, we're sacrificing every time we have a meeting. Right now, you're gonna be working a little bit short.
yeah.
And it's like-
Well, it's, there's people out there right now that don't have jobs, and
Right.
we don't want to come down with the
Well, I think
hammer
we're doing
with
our
rates,
part.
and we,
yeah,
and part of that is doing
I
our
even
part.
hate to ask that, but, like Terry said, try to do us a favor, try to find
Yeah.
us 19 grand without destroying the place.
Yeah, I certainly will. It's,
Right, thank
we
you.
will do our part.
So what's the direction on the water?
From what I heard, Jeremy will find reductions in wages and benefits for the $20,000 that's needed in lieu of the 3.5% rate
A
increase.
Zero water increase.
Correct.
Does that need to have a motion, or is that just assigned to you to find?
I think
Administrator?
I think you move to reject the proposed increase for the water rates that was presented at public hearing.
Make the motion to reject the 3.5% increase for water.
And direct county staff to find 19.9 in savings.
Let's ask
Is
them.
there a second?
And by doing that, you're also acknowledging that you are adopting or basically restating the rates as they are now. So the
Yeah, but
reason.
first I need a second for discussion.
Second.
Second, thank you, Wayne. Please continue.
The reason that's important is because if somebody wants to see what the rates are, we like to have them all at one place.
And I'll amend it to continue with the current water rates for fiscal year 2020.
21.
We'll continue the 2020 fiscal years as the same as the 2020 fiscal rates.
Is there a time limit on that? Like, what if, during my research, because we cut the water fund pretty tight right now, if there isn't an additional savings, I can find 20,000. What if that is the case? Because this is something I'm going to have to really look into.
You're going to have to find us
Yeah.
$19,900.
If there are 3 positions that are not going to be hired, we'll have the 20,000. And my recommendation would be to go in and reduce the wages for that.
That's something you all can come back with later.
If we just,
We need to pass a budget, so whatever happens there, we can't delay that because we have to assume that that's going to happen in order to move forward with the general fund budget, because we'll need an appropriation of
You
some sort
gotta-
if it
You've got to,
doesn't.
if this motion passes, you have to find $19,900. No, there's no
Right.
choice.
Correct.
No question about it. We'll have to find it.
Did I hear you say you'd take a pay cut? No, I'm just kidding.
we have a first and a second. Would someone restate the motion for clarity?
I make the motion that we can keep the fiscal year 2020 rates into 2021 for the water quality fund.
That was for discussion only. So I have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you, Jeremy.
You're welcome. Thank you, Commissioners.
All right, next up, approval of fiscal year 2021 operating and capital budget. Sarah, welcome back.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you, Sarah Greaves, Chief Financial Officer. Approval of the fiscal year 2021 operating capital budgets in front of you. The Board of County Commissioners conducted a public hearing on May 14th at 6 p.m. to permit the public to testify concerning the proposed fiscal year 21 operating and capital budgets. The public comment period was held open for 7 days following the hearing and closed on May 26th at 6 p.m. Commissioners, I do understand we're behind. I will keep this brief.
You have all the time
Thank you,
need
sir.
for such an important subject.
Thank you. You asked me to bring to you a lean budget. And that's what my staff, the departments, county departments, that's what we've pulled together for you. And that's what was presented at the public hearing. Does it mean that certain items will be delayed? Yes, it does. Did you already commit to reevaluate mid-year to determine if sufficient revenues exist to meet any of the requests that we could not fund initially? Yes, you did. You moved forward with this fiscal year 21 budget in a fiscally conservative and responsible manner, safeguarding against overcommitting revenues that may not be realized. We do not know the full impact of COVID-19, and that is why we've developed a budget and presented a very lean budget for you. We just got word that disparity grant may be on the chopping block for fiscal year 21. That could have a significant impact on our county. This is not the first time that we've thought this could happen. We've been talking from the beginning about how state cuts could impact our county. What we can try to make assumptions on is, what is our unemployment rate? Who is going to be affected? How much are they going to be affected? What businesses are going to close? But then we have this state impact to consider as well. And I'd like you today to stand behind this budget and adopt the proposed fiscal year 21 capital and operating budgets as they were presented on May 14th. And if you have any questions, I'm happy.
I do.
Yes, sir.
Late last year, did we not receive a one-time distribution of $4 million unexpected?
Yes, sir. June reconciliation
And
distribution.
that was over several years. And why they wait so long? We could have used $1 million at a time. I know you can't answer that, but
Yeah, income tax can be very volatile, and the state distribution is all based on an
if we
estimate.
didn't have that $4 million, we'd be a little more desperate straits right now.
We would
correct?
be, and up through May last year, we thought we were.
You probably won't have this answer, but do we anticipate another surprise disbursement of money of that nature?
Not that I'm aware of. That was a one-time thing related to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and so we received that based on revenue that was
So
received
$4 million
as an
really
impact.
helped in this budget that we have right now.
I'm sorry, sir, what was that?
$4 million distribution is a big asset, a big help to us.
Oh, yes, huge. That distribution is normally between $1 million and $1.5 million, and we received over five, so.
Sarah, I had asked you to, all of us did, but I was really, I wanted you to bring a real lean budget with, and like I think Commissioner Kiefer said earlier, wasn't much difference. It was a good one. It was a good one. So I'm open for any discussion within that budget, but I'm pretty good with it.
Yes, sir, thank you. We did, as we evaluated it, what was presented to you was the leanest that we could go, that we felt like we could operate on. Certainly there were certain increases that, may have needed to be put in the budget, such as utility increases or, contract increases, software increases, things that the county needs to operate on a daily basis. But there's nothing more than that in the budget.
Yeah, err on the side of caution. We don't know what this is going to do. We're still in our audits with our fire and rescue. We don't know what that's with the fire and rescue losing funds from fundraisers. We don't know what that's going to bring upon us. It's better to err on the side of caution, I think, at this point.
I would agree with you.
Sarah, if I can
Yes,
ask
sir.
a couple questions. We're discussing both operating and capital budgets now, right?
Yes, sir, that is the, yes.
I just would like to see if you could provide some commentary. I know there was a concern of a school board member about how we present our capital budgets, and including funds from grants from the state Board of Education contributions. Could you just comment on that? And I mean,
Sure.
that's standard procedure. I mean, when we discuss the cost of building a new school or any new building, not necessarily school related, we have to project the entire cost of it and document where the funding is coming from. So we're not trying to double dip.
No, sir, definitely not. It's clearly presented in the capital plan. So what the CIP committee in their review of the capital plan this year did was took the Board of Ed's requests, which exceeded the $4 million that the county provides annually, and shifted the other costs to contributions required from the Board of Ed to basically say, if you want to move forward with this plan, this is what would be required from the Board of Education. And so the county's portion remained at $4 million, and the other costs moved down to that contributions line item. It's very clearly spelled out there. We had not received any changes from the Board of Education. Certainly they could have submitted another draft to say, you know what, we don't feel comfortable with that, let's change it. We did not receive that. And so that is how the budget had been presented since February and is still presented today.
Okay, thanks for clarifying, because
Sure.
from an accounting standpoint, my understanding and my background, it's presented how it would be. You have to account for the full cost of a project
Yes,
and those
sir.
different funding sources. So,
Yes, sir, full
and we
cost.
clearly outline in our budget the amount we in county taxpayer funds are contributing to capital projects versus operating. So
Yes.
it was clear. Okay,
Very
thank
clear.
you. The other issue I have, again, I'm looking at the comments we received from citizens, and we probably did receive fewer comments this year, just because of how our budget had to be presented. That's nobody's fault. You know, obviously it is what it is. I'm wondering, what do we have in our correct me if I'm wrong, our commissioner's contingency fund? What remains at the end of a fiscal year gets put into reserves for the next year? We can't carry that amount over?
We do not carry that amount over. It does net against, you know, all of our other revenues, expenditures, and it comes out with our
But we're not allowed
surplus
to
and
carry
deficit.
any balance over. What's our balance right now?
Currently, I think the balance is around 35 or 40,000 off the top of my head.
What I would like to ask, I support the budget as presented, by and large. It's very lean times. It would be nice if we could do more. Again, I'm impressed that you were able to cut back from our original budget to what we're being presented today. $17 million is phenomenal. That goes to show me, though, just so you know, if we can do that in a time of need, we can also cut in a time of plenty as well. But would the commissioners be interested in, since we can't carry our commissioners' contingency fund over to the next fiscal year, I know there were some requests by the Commission on Aging, senior citizens. It could be senior programs in general, not necessarily allocated to that organization. But obviously, they are our county designated area agency on aging. They are who the commissioners have said will handle those issues of senior citizens. Could we commit to whatever remains in the commissioner contingency fund at the end of this fiscal year be provided for senior services, since they have been hit so hard with the coronavirus, the fears, the scare, the outreach of support? I know they continue to provide services to senior citizens in a different way, and food is a big issue right now. Would we be interested in doing that, since we can't carry the commissioner's contingency fund over?
Just as a segue, or just as a comment related to that, one thing to consider is that there will be a grant program that Susan Buchanan will have through her office with the Coronavirus Relief Fund that will offer funding for that exact purpose. I think the recommendation is up to $20,000 in a grant, so they would be an eligible agency for that money. And the only other comment that I would have would be that we've tried to reduce our spending, limited hiring of individuals, employees, and limited any other discretionary spending, so that we can try to put ourselves in a position, in a better position than we would otherwise be. And we do know that we have some income tax distributions coming up. We're not sure what to expect. I think that May's distribution should be pretty solid, because that will be from January, February, and March. But then the distributions that we get in June, July, and August will be for April, May, and June, and those are the ones that, we're really not sure what we're going to receive. So any savings, my point is, any savings that we could have in fiscal year 20 will help that bottom line. So just going into this discussion
I just
to
know
consider.
that's, like you said, it's up in the air and that money hasn't yet been allocated. And something could come up in the month of June before our fiscal year comes to a close that we need that money for. But if any remains,
Commissioners.
I'd like to see what we can do. I know every organization out there is deserving. I'm looking at our list of those who have responded to us, and seniors is just that group that sticks out to me. I know I've tried to help out personally with my own funds, with some meals, and it's just, I've received calls. I talk to seniors, and what can we do to help?
Right. I mean, that's up to the commissioner's
I just
discretion.
would support them going after the grant and give them full support behind that. Now that we mentioned one organization, we may have another half dozen who want to come forward to us for our commissioner contingency. Big supporter of the senior center. I was there when it was falling apart, and I think Commissioner Baker and I were the last two that had some more support. So it's not that I'm not supportive of the seniors, considering I'm a full-time caregiver for a 97-year-old center, but I'd like to endorse their application to submit for that $20,000 grant instead of our contingency fund. And that's just my opinion. Well-deserved organization, but there could be others just as deserved. Are we picking winners over losers over that?
I appreciate those comments. You're right. There are so many
being-
organizations that do a
so
great cause.
empathetic to that
This is just a group that
organization.
we are charged with defining.
But what did
unlike
they,
other-
what did they do to cut their budget and things? We don't have that information in front of us. I know the Community Action Council was pressed for money and food. Look what the great job the United Way did with raising funds. So I would suggest we wholly endorse them applying for the grant and support that.
I'm just trying to be creative and find ways of using that money that is, if we can't use it in that fund, it can't be carried over into the next year. And I'm just trying to be
Because
creative
it's
and find
there,
ways
don't mean we
to
need
help
to
as many
spend it,
people.
but
Do you know if the Meals on Wheels is fully funded now?
I do not know, sir.
Because I mean, with
Community
COVID,
Action Council does Meals on Wheels too, right? Not just, okay.
Yeah, they assist with that,
with,
and then the
COVID, I
Humane
just know
Society
there's gonna
helps
be more and
too.
more seniors going to be requiring the services of our senior center and the department down there. And I have that in my mind right now. So I want to hear what
Understood.
everybody else could do on the budget before I make a decision on the contingency fund contribution to the seniors.
Is that a fund if we don't use it, we lose it?
Yes, that's correct. It will hit our bottom line, so whatever savings is there will.
Where's the money go if we don't use it? Goes into the general fund as surplus?
Yes, it'll hit general fund reserves, or sometimes at the end of the year, if we do have a surplus, we'll move some over to capital for future one-time expenditures.
Over 6 months now, when that's approved as surplus, it could go to pay for fuel for a fire truck for a year. It could pay for a driver for a year, which all our senior citizens, all of us use. We know, for example, Boonesboro EMS is all $65,000 from their carnival. We have numerous other fire companies going to be coming to us for assistance because of fundraising and operations money. That $25,000 serves all our communities, including our seniors. Very passionate plea, but just because we have surplus doesn't mean as fiscal conservative Republicans we spend it.
Well, that's my next question.
Passionate conservative.
Yeah, well, they have, conservative passion, yeah, because all of us here have been strong supporters of that senior center, so it's not that we don't care.
Well, that's my next question is I know there's other funds that have a lot of money left over, but, and I'll straight up, $1 million to EMS, they spent $150,000. We have $850,000 sitting in that fund that's going to go, but that $850,000, from what I understand, it's not just going to go directly into the reserves. It's going to help offset some of the losses that we're anticipating. And I'm assuming the 34,000, I can't remember the number.
Yeah.
34,000, that's also going to help us offset the losses that we have somewhere else. So do we know currently what we're projecting at? I know that 34 might be a positive here, but where's the other negatives that we have? And do we know what we're looking at the end of the year on a total number?
Yeah, I mean, we were projecting, we'll know more as we get income tax distribution in, because that's That's the guy that can make us or break us. You know, our early estimates was like a 1.5 million deficit.
When's that distribution? See,
End of May, sir.
May, then we have another
May
one.
30th, I
Then we have
believe.
another one in November.
Another one, another large one in November, but we will have a distribution in June, July, and August.
When do
And those are the
unemployment
three.
rates come out for April, May, June? They're the last 3 months.
Local unemployment rates for April, we don't even anticipate until early June. So that's from our normal source. That's the soonest that we get them before, unless we would get information from somewhere.
So going back to my concern is I'm not willing to allocate $34,000 or a portion of that to a senior center if we're going to be on an overall deficit. You know, that's
Right.
my big fear. I mean, personally, I would like to see that $850,000 that we told EMS that they were going to have, and only 150 of it was been spent, that they're going to need that money. You know, like Commissioner Klein said, we already have companies that are hurting. We know that the ambulance calls are down 30% month over month, and they haven't had their carnivals, so they've lost.
Their billing is down 30%.
Yeah, their billing's down 30%, and we know that their carnivals aren't there, so their big fundraisers are gone. So those, we're going to be hit hard, and so I want to make sure that our EMS services are paired there, but also we're looking at a deficit here for our fiscal year because revenue's down. So that's the only reason why. Now, if we come back late June and it looks like we're positive,
Right.
well, then I'd be much more open to giving grants at that point, but not at this point.
I strongly support endorsing the application for a grant for the senior center for that additional revenue. And that's just my position. You can call for a vote on it or whatever, and that's fine. No offense taken on it. It's just,
I'm willing to, I'm going to err on the side of caution. I'm not saying I won't entertain that. When
We may
things
be in
look
a
better, I'm going to err on the side of caution, keep all the cash we can.
If we're at a better moment towards the end of June, I'd look at that, but at this point, I'm not willing to say that because that could be used for our deficit that we're going to have.
May will be the first distribution that we see the increase on. So, you know, it's an estimate. So, you know, I can come back.
That's certainly fine. Just, I'm trying to be creative. I mean,
and meanwhile, they
you
can
presented an
still-
idea to use the Commissioner Contingency Fund for the water and sewer, which is fine, you know, that's fine. Just, it's an idea that I presented. I do think that is a vulnerable population, certainly with the way the coronavirus, you know, the victims, unfortunately, that it takes, and just an idea.
well, maybe both options will occur the way we're talking about it.
We'll have to wait and see how revenues turn out for this year.
I don't know if anybody's paid attention to the state of Georgia. They're one of the first states to almost fully reopen since this, and their revenues are not bouncing back as quickly as they thought they were or anticipated.
Right.
So
I
that's,
would anticipate that too. I mean, there's going to be a change of behavior too that I think is going to occur. Yeah. Anyway, today I'd like to ask for your approval of the fiscal year 21 operating and capital budgets.
I'd motion to approve the fiscal 21 operating budget.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
First and a second. Any further discussion?
I'll be supporting, are we doing both? I'm sorry.
Yes, both.
Okay, I'm supporting both budgets, but I'd just like to issue that severe word of caution, the disparity grant. I cautioned last year, and part of the reason I voted against last year's budget and tax increase was it was based upon a disparity grant, and I said that could be cut at any time. But we were pretty sure it wouldn't be. Nobody ever thought coronavirus would come into play at that time. You know, we put all of our faith in the highway user revenues years ago, and when that declined 90%, we saw the impact. We're going to see the impact of the disparity grant. So just a word of caution. So glad we were able to cut $17 million of spending in a time of need. In a time of plenty, we should have done that as well, and we didn't last year. I'm worried about the disparity grant. So
Well,
I
Sarah,
support.
I do want to clarify that 17 million was never our proposed budget. That was from the requested.
That was a
amount.
draft. It was a draft budget.
Well, that was the requested amount. That was never one of our proposed. That was the requested.
How much was our revenue projections decreased by?
Our revenues were around 251
Yeah.
million. And so that is the 17 million that I think Commissioner Kiefer is referencing, which was a decline in our income tax revenue primarily. What we wrote it down to consider the impact of COVID-19. The expenditures were a very similar number at 252 million, even though that's not what we were presenting to be approved. That was requested, which is what you're thinking of, Commissioner Meinelschmidt. And we would have still recommended probably 10 million less than that amount because we needed to leave room to build up the fire and rescue and the Kerwin Commission as planned with some of those other expenditures in our 5-year plan. So you're both right, just in different ways.
So if we didn't have the one-time 4 million distribution, and if we didn't have the 6 million disparity grant, we'd be $10 million short here having a terrible conversation. Is that correct?
We would be in a worse position.
And I think what we saw today, excuse me one second, thank you, that Governor Hogan's going to veto the disparity grant guarantee. Is that what was in that email today?
In the email today was that, yeah, the disparity grant could be on the chopping block, and I'm not sure to what extent they're.
Increase, correct?
Just a point of clarification if I can, and you're right, we have the benefit today of that disparity grant, but we build our operating budget up when something that could go, that's not guaranteed revenue. A business wouldn't increase their operating expenses, employee payroll, reoccurring expenses on something that's not guaranteed.
I will say to that.
That is what gave me heartburn.
Hey, my only comment is we have a motion and a second on the floor, and we're getting ready to move forward with this. We better move forward before I change my mind.
All right.
But we currently, we receive grants. We receive
And we
grants
do
every
budget
single
them.
year, and we budget those grants every single year because they're reoccurring grants. And
Sure, but
that's
we made a
budgeted.
significant change in our budget with increasing a tax rate to take advantage of a disparity grant to the tune of millions of dollars, and we grew our operating expenses based on that. You're right, and every time we approve a position that's grant funded, we always ask, I think you're the number one person you ask, and it's great that you do. What's going to happen if the grant runs out? And usually we have those outside entities.
But we, internally
Commissioners, I'd like to,
also,
we've had some good discussion. I don't mean to cut you off, but we have a first and a second to approve both budgets. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No, just a comment when we're done with the vote.
Okay, aye or nay?
Okay. We're spending,
Okay, we got 4 aye.
I'm an aye.
Okay, 5-0, and you're welcome to have comments. Thank you for asking. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
No, I'm still in favor. When we spend $250 million, it warrants discussion, and I mean, we didn't get to have the level of public input that we normally have, so I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't have had a discussion or continued, or if it took a couple extra minutes. $250 million.
That's okay. We've had the discussion. I think we demonstrated that we went to a very conservative, lean budget. We cut out employee raises. Employees are paying more for health care.
Yeah.
One employee told me he lost a house payment, a house payment with his extra health care costs. So everybody's making sacrifices at county government to demonstrate to the public that we're using their money
That's right.
wisely. With that said, if there's no other comments, I'd like to move forward to the CARES Act. Susan Small.
We did a combined vote.
Thank you, Commissioners.
And I have allergies.
I'm going to leave these here.
Thank you for everything, Sarah.
I'll come back for them. Thank you.
Susan B. coming in as well.
There is. It says wipe it down.
Tom, is Susan Buchanan out there? Can she come in as well, please? These are sort of related. No, please. There's actually 2 items, but there's only 1 entry on the agenda, but they're both about the CARES Act.
Gotcha.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it is. I've misspoke.
Right here's fine.
All right, Susan Small, you're up.
Good afternoon,
CARES Act.
Commissioners. Yes, today I'm presenting the Business Stabilization Grant Program per some of the edits that were requested to be made based on conversations through our presentation of the program on the 19th, as well as subsequent meetings with the committee who has tried to form this between city staff and county staff. I'm going to pass this around. We've reviewed these guidelines even over the weekend several times and made updates to them accordingly. So I just want to go through these with you a little bit. Just a few major points of consideration that we added things or removed things via conversation that I've had with both Susan Buchanan and Sarah Greaves and the county attorney's office as well. One of the main questions that was brought up was the type of businesses that we would consider to be eligible, i.e. tattoo shops, adult bookstores, etc., as well as nonprofit organizations. We kept both. They remained on simply because there were several comments made that these are not subjective grants. These are not going to go through a ranking system or a point system. The fact of the matter is the federal guidelines give us the 4 bullet points of eligibility. So if a business meets those 4 and can prove themselves through the documentation we're requesting on the application, therefore they qualify. It is a first come, first serve application, or approval. So based on the documentation that they provide and their explanation of the use of the funds or the loss, then we would consider them eligible. Some of the other things that we did, we took off any of the questions on the application that would seem subjective, as if there were a review committee going to rank these by points. We are not going to do that. We're going to make this as easy as possible for businesses to apply, because we have to do this as fast as we can. The money is ready to go. Businesses are struggling, and I know that the commissioners and economic developers in the community support the businesses staying intact and trying not to delay these efforts. So I will certainly take any questions today. I'm asking for a motion to move forward with the grant program as presented, and I, again, haven't...
This is just for the application to proceed.
This is the application, and yes, and the guidelines.
Since the article in the paper, I've had about 10 phone calls. Who's the contact person? How they contact that person? Do you have that?
So ideally, the timeline, that's the other thing I wanted to bring up today. Given your approval of the guidelines and application today, I'd like to open the guideline and application to be live on our website as soon as possible. Tomorrow would be nice. I've gotten several phone calls and emails as well. So we will have a place for them to access the application and guidelines, an email, a phone number, all of that will be provided, as well as they can submit it electronically. We will offer a time for them to submit it in person if they'd like to have.
This will be in the paper, all the contact information?
Yes. I'm handling this as soon as we possibly can.
Is this first come, first serve, or are there qualifications you meet first? Or
there are qualifications, but it is a first come, first serve.
So qualifying.
Yes. So ideally, we give about a 2-week window of accepting applications. That way, there's a response to a lot of the businesses as to whether or not. So there's an end time versus leaving it open and them not knowing when the end would be.
If we approve this right now, is it ready to go on in the next 15 minutes?
I still have a few kinks to work out. Not kinks necessarily, just trying to get some things formalized with our IT department and PR as well.
So those listening can keep checking on our website periodically. Yeah. Today we'll have that information.
Yes. And I will provide an email and a phone number as soon as we possibly can. We've been responding to requests as quickly as we can, knowing I want to get this out tomorrow. It's a complicated thing.
It's just proof people do read the Herald Mail when we get that many calls about one article.
Yeah, I mean, we want it out as soon as possible, too.
Susan, question.
Yeah.
First, thank you for taking out the part about missing a rent payment and just showing the reduced sales income. I think very good. But the second thing, on home-based businesses, what about like a construction company that uses their home address? Does that consider, would they be ineligible?
So it will all come back to what qualifies them as a business. They have to support they have to supply documentation that would support them being an incorporated business or sole proprietorship, or however it comes out on their 1099 or their W-2s.
Okay.
So if they can support documentation or supply us with that checks that box, yes, they are qualified.
I just wanted to make sure, because I know there's smaller construction or
Yeah.
plumbing companies that use their home.
Yeah,
And I just want to make sure that
absolutely.
they're not
Yeah.
outstanding. Thank you.
Yep. Yes.
Could we not just strike that as an ineligible applicant? I'm thinking of, there's many home-based businesses, and if they see, oh, well, I'm ineligible because my business is at home. I know some home-based businesses that employ people.
We could just take it off if we're saying the eligibility falls underneath the documentation that you provide us to check that box. But I don't see why not.
Someone who might sell, there's things that some.
Right. We were trying to say,
Just read his comments for
yes.
review.
Right, but a salon in someone's basement who they are a legit business and can provide tax documentation to say that, that's qualified.
Another question I have, grant funds cannot be used for non-critical inventory. Was that something that we inserted, language we inserted, or is that part of
That came from the federal program. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm thinking, is there a way for a restaurant, they probably have to throw away a lot of food that's spoiled and what have you, as they prepare to reopen.
Yeah, I guess we could take that under consideration, sure. Mm-hmm.
So, that's gonna be a sizable amount of their need right now to start back up,
Mm-hmm.
buying that inventory, so how can we handle that?
Well, I think that's a loss in product because of the situation. So that to me would explain, the loss of the product. That's a loss of their
That's
overhead.
critical inventory.
Yeah, their inventory, right. So I would consider that to be a legitimate loss, yeah.
And 8.9 million is dedicated to this, correct?
Yes.
Said 2 weeks.
Fast as possible. We're going to leave the application open for 2 weeks, but we'd like to be able to respond to those who qualify and review the process. We're going to start as soon as we can possibly start accepting applications with all the documentation. That's going to be the hard part. Is we could say we are going to open it tomorrow, but a lot of businesses may not have all this paperwork readily available to
You might be able to create a draft of determination letter, or
yeah, the award letter. Susan and I are going to, yeah.
to show a bank for additional financing they're getting, or maybe a creditor or a landlord to show money's coming.
Yeah, I think there's an award letter that we've talked about doing.
Yes, in general, both for the Business Stabilization Grant Program and the one we'll talk later about for the nonprofit increased service grant, a standard to have an award letter that would be what is sent out to the applicant once it's gone through the approval process. I also would recommend, based upon the terms and conditions that we have to make sure that we're adhering to, that we would have a terms and condition acceptance that the applicants would have to sign and return to before they would get the disbursement of those funds.
Two last questions. You said it's $8.9 million going to this,
Yes.
and so that's $10,000. It's 89,000 businesses, hopefully, that will receive these 10. If there's money left over, what happens to this after the time period?
I mean, I guess we need to determine if we're going to continue rolling the applications. I mean, that would be my suggestion. This is going to be hard hit for a while.
Oh, yeah.
So
And
if
that's
at
what
the
I was
end of
asking,
a
if there's-
2-week period, we still have funds not allocated to applications, I think that we should continue to keep the time period rolling.
Would that happen, or would we be able to increase the amount to the businesses that already applied? I'm just
That to me
asking
is, I'm not sure I would, the hard part is then the ones that applied now, because they're not required to use the funds before the end of the year. Why would later ones get more than the ones now, I guess is my question. I would caution against putting more weight on a timeline for businesses, rather just leaving the amount the same and expanding the timeline that they can apply, because they all have to use it by the same time frame.
And then in 2 weeks time frame, 3 weeks time frame, we'd be able to know how many businesses that we're able to help by this, so we can put that in the paper and say, hey, you know, of our 8.9,
Right.
$7.2 million went directly to help Washington County businesses.
Right, yep.
Perfect, thank you.
Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the implement of the Together We Rise Business Stabilization Grant Program.
Is there a second?
Does that include the amendments for home-based businesses being stricken? And I guess that may have been the only change.
You want to do it inside this, let's have a second, then do that discussion.
Second.
Second? And we can continue your discussion.
Does that motion, Court, also include striking home-based businesses?
I don't think we should strike it, but I definitely think we should clarify it.
Clarify it, yeah.
'Cause
Okay. So I guess the clarification would then be pretty simple. I mean, it would guide them back up to what qualifies them as a business.
exactly, we're not looking for the, like Commissioner Kiefer said, the fundraiser type or the, you know, hey, I'm selling little things. We're looking for the real businesses.
Yeah.
You know, if there's some
I'll come up with
clarification.
some language and share that with you all,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Because I definitely, like
All right, have a
you said,
first and a
many
second.
legitimate businesses that use their own.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. My vote, thank
Thank you,
you.
Commissioners.
Next up, review of, well, Susan, that's you.
I'll go ahead.
Marilyn?
Good morning. Susan Buchanan, Director, Office of Grant Management. I'm here this morning to present a review the draft Washington County COVID-19 Emergency Response Grant Program. I'd also like to request a motion, if possible, to approve this program as written or with any discussed modifications this morning, and allow the Office of Grant Management to move forward with implementing the program and awarding funds to eligible applicants. The Federal CARES Act has created the Coronavirus Relief Fund to assist local governments in offsetting expenses incurred directly to the COVID-19 pandemic and to assist in the local response to the public emergency. Allowable uses of these funds include supporting local human service providing agencies by assisting with costs related to the safe delivery of services and meeting the increased needs of the community directly related to the health crisis and its subsequent economic impact. Washington County has been allocated $13,178,443 for the non-public health response activities. The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in increased demand for many local nonprofits, particularly those serving vulnerable populations such as seniors, the homeless, the disabled, and low-income households. The Washington County Office of Grant Management has developed a grant program to assist local 501c3 human service providers in addressing increased needs for the services caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and to allow these agencies to safely provide services during the health crisis. The proposed funding amount for the program from the Coronavirus Relief Funds is $1,186,060. The program will assist eligible nonprofits with providing increased food and essential supplies, providing services virtually to clients, providing emergency economic assistance to eligible households, such as eviction and utility cutoff assistance, personal protective equipment for service providers, sanitization for nonprofit facilities such as shelters, and overtime for frontline service positions. Draft program guidelines have been attached, which provide more detail of the program. If approved, the Office of Grant Management would move forward with implementing the program. Draw attention to the attachment where you can see it goes over the general eligibility and lists the ineligible organizations and policies affecting eligibility. The maximum award for this is $20,000. All funds should be expended by November 1st, 2020. There would be a grant report that would be required within 30 days of spending the money or by November 1st, whichever I think November 15th, whichever happens first, that the organization would have to provide documentation that they had spent the funds as they had indicated, and that it was something that when an auditor would come in and look at it, we would have substantial documentation to prove that the funds were spent on an eligible use related to the coronavirus relief funding. Any other questions? Maybe I should just let you open up to questions.
Commissioners, comments, questions? Motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
A
Second,
first-
I have some questions.
Okay.
First, go ahead.
And I know you can answer them, Susan. So I see construction or renovation expenses would not be eligible. I know some businesses, not nonprofits that I can think of offhand, but some businesses that are kind of reworking their front entry door to include like a window so people don't have to come into their business and they can just kind of transact their business through a window. Might that be appropriate?
I can see where there would be certain modifications that may be, you're looking at $20,000 budget, that really is part of one of the reasons. Maybe I should start by answering why I included that in there.
Okay.
The amount of money, $20,000, most capital projects, home renovation projects, that would not be something you could do anything with. The amount of time they have to spend the money and have it and know that it's all been spent, that would also be it. Also, since this is federal money that ultimately is coming through the state to the county, and unfortunately the guidance on it is somewhat thin. There's often regulations with construction related to any type of federal money being involved in it, and then using prevailing wages and things of that nature. And if that would be the case, then that would really make it so that it wasn't even going to be cost effective for someone to use those funds when it's only a $20,000 project. I could see where purchasing equipment, things of that nature, but not your labor or anything like that. So I could modify that to say equipment or supplies, but just not a labor contract to do a capital project.
Okay. Just a thought that I had. And then when we look at ineligible organizations, churches are not eligible, but some of the organizations that might operate within that church facility. I know several churches in our county that operate daycare centers, for example, so they would be included if they're organized as a 501c3.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, I have a first and a second. That was discussion. Call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I now need a motion to go into closed session.
Make a motion to go to closed session.
Second.
Second, first and second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Yep.